Hello, dear audience of Moonlit West. Today, we'll continue following the journey of old Walter as he takes on new adventures and challenges. By liking and subscribing to our channel, you can also show your support. And don't forget to leave a comment with your impressions or suggestions so we can improve and make our content even better. Thank you so much for your support. And now, let's dive back into the journey together. The Crown and Bartholomew. The long journey finally brought Walter's group to Ashwood Peak, where darkness and heat from the volcano permeated the air. The landscape was a far cry from the peace of Old Pine Forest or the crystal-clear streams of Willow Creek. Lava rocks stretched across the terrain. Fissures emitted thick gray smoke, and every step crunched against the rough, thorny ground. Walter paused, standing atop a high ledge. Below was an enormous cave, its entrance glowing with a golden light emanating from deep within. Howard approached, his voice hoarse. That's where Bartholomew, the dragon who guards the Dawn Crown, resides. But no one gets out alive if that beast finds them. Walter swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the cave. Fear churned in his chest, but so did a quiet resolve. He had come too far to turn back now. They approached the cave's entrance, where waves of oppressive heat rolled out, causing sweat to stream down everyone's faces. "I'll scout ahead," Walter said, gripping the moonlight medallion tightly. Before the astonished eyes of Howard and the miners, he vanished, his body blending seamlessly into the surroundings, like a shadow. Walter crept cautiously into the cavern. The sight inside took his breath away. Bartholomew's treasure was piled high into small mountains, with thousands of gold coins, jewels, and ancient artifacts glinting under the flickering light of lava pits. At the center of it all lay Bartholomew, coiled in slumber, his enormous crimson body glowing as though forged from fire. The dragon's breath exhaled waves of smoke, its folded wings towering over its back, and its shimmering scales reflecting light like massive mirrors. But Walter quickly noticed something strange. On its chest, near its heart, there was a small gap where the scales seemed to be missing. That was its weak point. Walter clenched his fists, fear giving way to focus before he could retreat. Bartholomew stirred. A low, thunderous growl rumbled from its throat. Walter stepped back, but his foot accidentally struck an old helmet. The metallic clang reverberated through the still cavern like an explosion. Bartholomew's fiery golden eyes snapped open, their depths swirling with menace. The dragon roared, its voice shaking the cavern walls. Flames erupted from its maw, and Walter barely managed to activate the medallion in time to escape. Bartholomew unfurled its massive wings, ascending into the sky like a fiery specter. The heat from its wings made the air ripple like a mirage. Walter had just escaped the cave when he heard the dragon's deafening roar. "Elmwood?" Howard gasped, his face pale. "It's going to destroy the lakeside town." The group raced down the mountain in desperation. When they reached a high ridge overlooking Elmwood, the scene below wrenched their hearts. The colossal dragon circled the town, spewing fire onto the buildings, engulfing everything in an inferno. Villagers fled in panic, their cries for help echoing across the valley. In the town, an old man stood atop a weathered bell tower. Franklin, a retired veteran with snow-white hair, watched the dragon with a steely gaze. In his hands was a worn longbow and a single intricately crafted arrow. Franklin said nothing. He raised his bow, aiming directly at the beast on the tower. Franklin's memories of countless battlefields returned, the dangers he had faced and survived. His heartbeat slowed, and though his hands were aged, they remained steady. He waited for a fleeting moment when Bartholomew turned its chest toward him, exposing the vulnerable spot. "Now," Franklin whispered, releasing the string. The arrow streaked through the air like a silver flash, striking the gap in the dragon's chest. Bartholomew roared in agony, its massive wings flapping erratically before its enormous body plummeted into the lake, creating a thunderous explosion that echoed through the valley. The lake hissed and bubbled as Bartholomew's fiery body sank. Then all grew silent. The people of Elmwood exhaled in relief, and Franklin, though exhausted, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Walter and his group arrived in Elmwood just as the chaos subsided. They found Franklin sitting by the lakeside, his gaze distant. Howard approached and placed a hand on the veteran's shoulder. "You saved us all. No one will ever forget this." Walter stood silently, his eyes following the smoke, still lingering over the lake's surface. He knew this battle was a testament to the power, not only of weapons, but of wisdom, courage, and quiet sacrifice. Yet, his gaze drifted toward the horizon, knowing this journey was far from over. The battle at Ashwood Peak. The first rays of sunlight pierced Ashwood Peak, but the heavy tension lingering there refused to dissipate. In Bartholomew's former cave, the gleaming treasure became the focal point of a standoff between three factions: the people of Elmwood, the miners of Stonehaven, and the elves of Old Pine. Each group glared at the horde, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of greed and pride. "This gold belongs to us." Howard, the leader of the dwarves from Stonehaven, slammed his hammer into the ground, his voice resolute. "We lost everything to that dragon. This is justice for us." The people of Elmwood, led by a strong-willed woman named Marianne, refused to back down. Justice? Did you lose your homes and fields like we did? Without Elmwood's sacrifice, that dragon would still be alive. This treasure is ours to rebuild our town. On the other side, Lord Eldwin, leader of the elves from Old Pine, stood tall, his cold gaze sweeping over the crowd. You squabble like children. This treasure has belonged to Old Pine for centuries. Only we know how to protect and use it wisely. Walter stood silently in the corner, clutching the moonlight medallion. He had seen enough. Greed was seeping into their hearts, threatening to undo everything they had accomplished together. We fought together to defeat the dragon, Walter said, his voice steady. Don't let this treasure turn us into enemies. But no one listened. His words were drowned in the rising cacophony of shouts. The tension reached its peak when Howard raised his hammer and Marianne and Eldwin signaled their people to ready their weapons. A three-way battle seemed inevitable. As the shouting escalated, another sound began to echo. Heavy, rapid footsteps and guttural growls. A chill ran down Walter's spine. From outside the cave, a goblin horde appeared, led by Grimshaw, the foe they thought they had left behind. "They're back!" Howard shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. The goblins, wielding crude weapons, vastly outnumbered the factions. Grimshaw, astride a massive black wolf, roared, his voice booming throughout the cavern. "Did you think you'd escaped? Now you'll all die, and this treasure will be mine." Chaos erupted. The dwarves, elves, and villagers were forced to abandon their feud and fight the common enemy. The clanging of metal and cries of battle filled the cavern. Walter, though terrified, knew this was their final chance to prevent disaster. While the factions fought the goblins, Walter used the medallion to remain hidden in the shadows. He watched Grimshaw, who commanded from a distance, laughing as he believed victory was within his grasp. Walter realized that if Grimshaw fell, the goblins would lose their leader and scatter. Walter crept closer to Grimshaw, his heart pounding as he approached the wolf. Its glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for prey. Walter waited, observing their every move. When Grimshaw raised his sword to issue another command, Walter seized his chance. Thanks to the medallion, Walter managed to sneak up on Grimshaw undetected. He grabbed a piece of rope, left discarded on the cavern floor, and quickly fashioned it into a noose. With all his strength, he hurled the rope over the wolf's neck. The beast roared and reared, throwing Grimshaw off balance and sending him tumbling to the ground. Walter wasted no time, snatching a broken stick nearby and striking Grimshaw hard on the head. The goblin leader roared in fury, his golden eyes blazing with rage. He stood, swinging his massive sword toward Walter. Despite his fear, Walter recalled all that he had endured. He leapt back, dodging the blow, then lunged forward, aiming for Grimshaw's legs and forcing him to collapse. "You think you can defeat me, old man?" Grimshaw sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Walter didn't respond. Instead, he activated the medallion, vanishing into thin air. Grimshaw, panicked, twisted and turned, searching frantically, seizing the moment. Walter reappeared behind him and delivered a decisive blow to the head. Grimshaw crumpled to the ground, motionless. The goblin's shout suddenly fell silent, leaderless. The goblin army quickly disbanded, retreating into the shadows. When the battle ended, the factions stood in silence, watching one another. Howard, Marianne, and Eldwin approached Walter, their eyes filled with respect. "You've saved us all," Marianne said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You didn't just save us," Eldwin added, his voice deep and steady. "You've shown us something far more important than this treasure, our survival and unity." Walter smiled faintly, though his body was weary from the battle. He knew this wasn't just his victory, it was everyone's. As the sunlight streamed through the cave's entrance, illuminating the treasure, Walter realized that true value didn't lie in gold or jewels, but in courage and humanity. Walter's return. The morning sun filtered through the trees, along the path leading to Willow Creek, accompanied by a gentle, refreshing breeze. Walter walked slowly, his feet sore from the long journey, but his heart felt light, as if a great weight had been lifted. On his shoulder was a small bag containing only a few basic items, and a silver lantern, the sole keepsake he had taken from Bartholomew's treasure. With each step, the tiny bell on the lantern chimed softly, reminding him of the trials he had faced and the true value of his adventure. Willow Creek appeared before him like a tranquil painting. Verdant fields stretched into the distance. Golden daisies bloomed brightly in the sunlight, and the small stream still babbled, just as it had when he left. But now, Walter saw everything through a new lens. It wasn't the scenery that had changed. It was him. Walter stopped at the town's entrance, where an old wooden sign hung crookedly beneath the shade of an oak tree. He spotted familiar faces, his neighbors gathered near the town square. But instead of their usual bustle, the atmosphere was solemn and hushed. In the center of the square stood a small memorial altar, adorned with a portrait of Walter himself, the man they believed lost forever, on an impossible journey. Walter stood motionless, a strange emotion welling up inside him. He had never thought he meant much to anyone, beyond his little house and daisy garden. But here, his neighbors, young and old, were mourning him, as though he were an indispensable part of the town. A child was the first to notice him. "Walter!" she shouted, her eyes wide with astonishment. The crowd turned, and the silence was broken by cheers and exclamations of joy. They rushed toward him, enveloping him in hugs and bombarding him with questions. Walter could only smile, overwhelmed by the warmth surrounding him. "We thought you'd never return," said Mrs. Agnes, the oldest neighbor, tears welling in her eyes. "You went further than anyone from this town ever has." Howard and the miners from Stonehaven had already departed, and the elves of Old Pine had returned to their forest. Yet Walter knew that his journey wasn't just about defeating a dragon or reclaiming treasure. It had been about discovering a part of himself he never thought existed. Back at home, when the crowd dispersed, Walter returned to his small home, where everything remained as it had been when he left. The vibrant daisy garden glowing in the sunlight, the wooden chair on the porch, and the familiar sound of the stream trickling nearby. But now, as he sat down, he felt a deeper sense of peace, not because the world outside was quiet, but because his soul had found contentment. He placed the silver lantern on the table, its light reflecting across the small room. To others, the lantern might have been a mere trinket, but to Walter, it was a symbol of the lessons he had learned, that even in the darkest moments, the faintest light can guide the way. When days of peace. In the days that followed, Walter lived much as he always had, tending his garden, sipping tea in the morning sun, and chatting with his neighbors. But now, people regarded him differently. No longer the reclusive old man. Walter had become someone admired by all, not because he was a hero, but because he had shown that courage isn't about age or strength, but about facing fears and pushing beyond one's limits. Walter often shared his adventures with the children, tales of the stone trolls, Grimshaw's goblins, and the dragon Bartholomew. But instead of focusing on the dangers, he highlighted moments of trust, friendship, and unity. "We can all be heroes," he said with a smile, "when we stand together." The meaning of the story. Walter's journey was not just about overcoming external challenges, but also about discovering his inner limits, his courage. Whether facing Bartholomew or Grimshaw, stemmed from his belief that he could achieve things he had never imagined possible. Friendship and unity were evident in every step he took with his companions. Coming from different worlds and with unique goals, they ultimately realized that true strength lay in cooperation. Ultimately, Walter's journey was a lesson in growth, not defined by age, but by self-awareness. From a quiet, unassuming man, he became someone who could face danger, conquer fear, and find meaning in the simplest things, like the glow of a silver lantern or the smiles of those around him. In the brilliant sunset of Willow Creek, Walter stood by the stream, watching the light dance on the water's surface. He lifted the silver lantern, allowing its light to mingle with the evening glow. Though his journey had ended, Walter knew the lessons it brought would remain forever, not just in his life, but in the stories he would pass on to future generations. Tonight's story has come to an end, but the lessons of courage and unity will linger in our hearts. Moonlit West hopes you found warmth, peace, and a spark for beautiful dreams within this tale. If you have thoughts, comments, or feedback, please share them below. Your words are like guiding moonlight, helping Moonlit West continue to improve and bring meaningful stories to you. Wishing you a peaceful night, and we'll see you on the next journey under the moonlight.